And to screw it up less next time, although we can't possibly screw it up as badly as the city is screwing this up.
And welcome to the This Week in Worcester Let's try again. Welcome to the This Week in Worcester podcast, coming to you live from Gaslight City.
You better be careful because people are throwing that back at you now out there in the media world.
Are they? I don't pay attention. I'm Tom Marino. I am editor of This Week in Worcester. I'm here with Mr. John Edward Keogh. He is executive producer at Managing Media. He is president of Hollywood Film Group. He is a contributor to This Week in Worcester. My friend John, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm all right. How are you doing?
I've had an interesting week. Do you remember the level of anger you had when your petition was denied by someone outside the council that told you that you were unable to petition your council?
Oh, the cable thing. Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
I was displeased.
Well, if they thought you were angry, they ain't seen nothing yet. I'm going to put this on the screen. Folks on mobile, you may not be able to read it. I just threw it into a text editor, so if you have trouble reading, I'm going to read it anyway. But I just want to show that, this is the actual text, if I ever find it. Oh, maybe I can't. I can only do stuff that's... Oh, no, lied. Here we go. So I submitted a petition that I had hoped would be on the agenda for Tuesday. It asked the city council to schedule and hold a public forum, and I even used their ridiculous language, and request the city manager to request the chief of police to appear to present allegations within the Department of Justice Past and Practice investigation report, which the department has determined are accurate. See, we've been talking for 5 months about everything wrong with the report. I thought, maybe we want to talk about what's accurate in it. I just maybe they just forgot to do that part. And my petition goes on further. Request the city council ensure the venue where said public forum is held have the functionality to display video, and that the video evidence of the 2 cases cited in the Department of Justice for which video has already been released to the public be displayed, and analysis requested to be provided by the chief of police. Tell us why these things are okay. Tell us why you still employ these people, right? And the things in said videos. Now, don't get me wrong. With this council, this was not going to pass because it's an election year, and that's the last thing they want to talk about is the actual facts, the things that they should be concerned about, rather than worrying about, things outside their purview that they were so concerned about in October. Very concerned about purview in October. Now, federal government is fair game. And so I got a letter back from the clerk's office with an explanation from the city solicitor on why my petition was not accepted. And this is a doozy, kids. So this is from, top is from, our office was able to review a petition, blah, blah, blah. This is the reasoning cited by our dear city solicitor. The power of city council is generally said to be the power to make sweeping determinations of municipal policy. She's kind of citing a bunch of case law, or to make new law, as opposed to the execution of laws already in existence. Case law. The legislative power is exercised by the adoption of orders, ordinances, and resolutions. And then I like when they cite the charter to me, although that's one person that can. That's the city's attorney. The rest of them, I'm not sure that they've, a lot of people in city government, I'm not sure that they've read it. But Section 3.1 of the charter states that city manager shall be the chief administrative and executive officer of the city, responsible for the administration of all city agencies, whether established before the adoption of this charter or thereafter, except blah, 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 blah. And then the bottom is just, so we can't put this on the agenda. John, did I ask them to execute any laws?
No.
Did I somehow dispute that the chief administrative and executive officer of the city is the city manager?
No.
What I asked to do is hold a public forum and talk to voters. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how else to take this explanation, but the administration, because the solicitor is, people are confused about this, but the solicitor works for the city manager. She is an administration official. She speaks for the administration. It apparently is the administration's position that city councilors can't talk to voters, or can only do so in certain contexts, I guess, is a better way to put it. I don't know how else to interpret this. What did I ask them to do that is outside of their delegated powers? Do you have a theory for me? Because I don't get it.
I mean, I have a general theory, and that's that they just don't want to accept.
That's what it is.
Your proposal, and they couldn't really wrangle the right legal argument, so they just kind of made one up, because this is really kind of, respect as much as I can. It's gobbledygook, and it doesn't mean anything, and so.
Well, it means stuff. It just isn't relevant to my petition.
It has nothing to do with your petition, yeah.
So I'm sure city councils will be surprised to know. Be careful in which the context you talk to voters in, because apparently sometimes if you did that like in a setting of a public forum that you held as a council, that's apparently, according to the administration, against the law.
Right. Which of course it's not, and it does come from this long set of precedents of policy decisions and ordinance development through the city manager's office, who has a vested interest, and this is not just this city manager, but the city managers in the past, of accumulating and retaining authority and decision making, right, within their structure. And they have there's a natural inclination in any government agency to do that always, right? And so they're just doing what their natural inclination is to do. Is, well, we know how to do it better, and so we'll take over this part, and we know how to do this part better, and so then there's always going to be arguments that they spit out to try to deflect anything that would directly affect them. But I mean, generally speaking, that just sounds not American, right? Voters should be able to engage with their public officials, even in a public forum that is a specifically designed thing. And again, I'm watching them live, by the way, hold these public hearings with the chief of police giving responses, and they're going to claim, I'm making this prediction in advance, that Mayor Petty and the city manager are going to say that this fulfills their obligation to the 4 or 5 public, I think it was 5 public hearings that they promised in relation to the DOJ thing. And so I think I have a prediction is that this report, the one he did before, those were 2, and then the 2 public safety meetings will count as 2, and then they'll do some third one where he gives another report, and that'll create 5 total public hearings, and they'll say, hey, we fulfilled our obligation. And then if you want to put in your petition, they'll allow it, but they're gonna try to stop you from doing it until they get through their little plan to facilitate those public hearings. So that's my theory right now, is what it is. And it is, I will say this is not wild speculation. This is slightly informed theory rendering here live on This Week in Worcester. Slightly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to spend much time pushing this. I'm going to, talk to some folks and of course, I responded to now I'm responding to the clerk's office because they filter it through them. And I'm going, when did I do any of this? And of course, they don't respond. And I don't blame them because it's not their decision. But, that's the level of engagement that we get on these issues. It's not your council, it's theirs. And, it is interesting, though. Do you remember earlier this year, there's some controversy about a councilor who potentially, allegedly said some things. She denies saying them. But in that process, when some councils were looking for the council to hire an outside investigator to investigate these claims, first they wanted the administration, the office of, the EI office, to investigate these claims. And it first seemed like they're going to do that. And then in the next meeting, the city manager had a very almost 180 turnaround on this and explained that, well, the council is independent. So the administration would have no ability to do this because it is not, the council is independent from the administration. So that's like two separate bodies now we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of an attorney who represented two bodies in the same matters in which they may have conflict over?
That's not allowed, Tom.
No, it's actually specifically against the Bar Association rules. So I'm gonna, I'm gonna chase this a little. I'm not gonna put a lot of effort in because at this point we should know what they'll do. They'll slither and hide, and have their quacked out supporters attack me, and do everything they can to hide, to deal with anything that's true in the report. Because what's important here is the federal government bad. Do you also remember in another contentious debate in city council? Do you remember a member of the city council saying, and I quote, "The real enemy is down in Washington. We all know that," end quote?
Oh, yeah. I do remember that. I even remember who.
Well, I do too. For 5 months, what we've been told is we're the only ones you can trust. Everything else is either fake news or a deep state conspiracy, and we take no responsibility for anything.
I wonder where they got that playbook from.
I was always skeptical of this idea of Trump Democrats, but I realized where to find them. In the Worcester City Council.
Yeah, right here in Worcester.
Yeah.
And I mean, this goes to my law. I mean, you and I have done the deep dive on, the binary political theory here in the United States, where there's two sides, but realistically, there's not really two sides. There's just two parties, kind of uniparty group that are two corporations that kind of operate our country as a domestic, company, and then there's some particular cultural issues where there's public debate, but they're just kind of cycled back and forth throughout time and history, and they're never really settled, right? There's a bunch of them. Right now we're in the cycle, back into the cycle of immigration, right? Immigration has been this long time wedge issue that has been fought over back and forth some people think it just started in the 70s, but it didn't. This is something that has been going on since time immemorial, right? Since the United States became its own country, there's been this kind of back and forth over who should be in America and who shouldn't, and it's always there's a cycle of pro-immigrant and then there's a cycle of anti-immigrant, but it doesn't really change the policy situations. And often the pro-immigration groups, which tend to be the Democrats, at least publicly, often make policies that then the anti-immigration groups exploit when they become in charge, and so it's just a constant, never-ending cycle. Mm-hmm. And what happens in the cycle is we never resolve the folks who actually live here and work here. As you saw this week, now we now have an admission that at least 3 children were summarily deported without due process. And by the way, just in one quick tangent, for those Republicans who like to watch our show, due process is not a 24-hour notice. Okay.
Yeah.
It is not a 24-hour notice. Due process is the ability to actually make a petition. And to make a petition, you need to be able to get to the court or the venue that you're being, ordered out through. And so when the federal government is ordering you out through, then any federal court is technically the venue, right? And it's usually related to where your body is residing. The thing is if you're from Maryland, for example, and you get taken from Maryland on a plane in the middle of the night to Bellevue, Texas, a town that probably never expected to be this popular, right? So in the middle of the night, the venue for you is still Maryland. Because that's where you were resided, right? And then if you use this petition, which most people don't know, but habeas corpus, it means bring the body. That's what that means. To put in a Hague petition is what separates democratic, kind of nations from everybody else since the Magna Carta. This idea that you could make a petition to go before the ruler in some way, and then the person who's made the decision. Huh?
How do we get to here?
I'm almost there.
Okay.
My point is that you can't do that in 24 hours. You just can't. It's not possible. You can't even talk to a lawyer or even figure out how to represent yourself when in the middle of the night you were snatched and moved to another state. Just emotionally speaking, it's going to be difficult for you to process what just happened to you. And so, but to be able to actually put together a legal petition that makes an argument for you, that's due process. That's going to take longer than a day. And so, that particular aspect that we're watching happen at the federal level, when it trickles down to our local municipality here, it often involves the very same logic, but just a slightly different mechanism, right? It's usually we've dealt with so this petition that you've got. Well, we already dealt with that. Or Tom, we're not going to do that because it's being dealt with over here. It's this really snap decision that really means that they didn't take what you had seriously. Their intention was to stop you from getting it on the agenda no matter what. And so that means that they're not actually giving you as a petitioning citizen your due process in being able to engage with your elected representatives, effectively nullifying you as a citizen and whatever rights that are supposed to be afforded to you. So right now you're being denied your ability to be a citizen. And we're seeing it live. It's the same exact process. Now, of course, they're going to argue, oh, it's not the same thing. It is the same thing. It's the same logic in that you think that you rule from this aristocratic thought process. You're the king, and even though they're the city council, we're the city council. We make this decision, and in this case, we're the city manager / city attorney. All one thought process. We can determine what goes on the agenda, and you cannot. People. So, Tom, you stepped out of line, Tom. Stepped out of line.
And I breezed over the closing statement, the closing from the clerk's office after they, quoted the solicitor. And it's something we need to touch on here. With that being the case, and because the issue of the Department of Justice report at large is already before the Public Safety Committee, we would suggest and encourage you to attend the next committee meeting. Okay, one, I was at that committee meeting last time, and I heard 35 minutes about what's wrong in the report. And two, the committee chairperson is, is it fair to say, let me ask you, is this fair to describe Councilor Toomey as effectively a lobbyist for the police unions?
She works for a law enforcement department. She's
it's not connected. Those were, she is employed by the Worcester County Sheriff's Department, but that's, it's not connected to the police department.
Yeah, I question that. And so it's hard. It's really hard to see how you manage the public safety departments when you're working for one of them, or even one that's slightly off in a different configuration. It's hard for me to understand that, especially when we have city councilors like Mo Bergman stepping out of the council hall anytime LLCs are reviewed, right? So we have one extreme example of recusing themselves for anything related, and we have another example of someone who can't help but be influenced by the brotherhood that is, law enforcement in general, and they really do take that kind of thing seriously, except when it comes to jurisdiction, and then they fight it out amongst themselves. But most of the time, the back the blue, the thin blue line, all that kind of stuff, it's very true, and so it's hard to see how she can take a fair view of this. And then her performance in that particular hearing, having now watched it back multiple times, she's reading from notes.
I mean, look, this whole thing, this whole thing has been, and they're very bad at it. But this is all coordinated. This is all strategy.
So
it's not like this is happening organically. This has been well strategized.
So I had this conversation earlier with somebody who I respect, and I said that my theory is that most leaders are either stupid or devious, right? There's two groups, and often I find myself thinking that they're really devious, and they're like really plotting and planning it out, and it's like strategy that is like of the we got to stop them. But then there's this other thing where it was like they sat in a room and they thought, you know what would be cool? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take down a college student from Harvard, and we're gonna make it so everybody now blames the college student from Harvard for the DOJ report. And we've actually seen people that are saying those things, like on our chat, right? There's people who have said that, which is like exactly my point. Real quick, Fred, you need to read the Constitution. It's the 14th Amendment. Anybody who's standing on American ground, you're 100% wrong. And Antonin Scalia wrote a long book about this. So all protections are afforded to people that are standing on ground. You get due process even if you came here illegally. So you're wrong, 100%. And unequivocally, there is zero evidence to support you except for blowhards who just make it up, but they haven't read the Constitution. So
yeah, and I would just encourage everyone to, the next time you have you're inspired to review the United States Constitution, look where they use the word citizen and when they use the word persons.
Yes, persons, all persons.
That was
cookies. More cookies.
Well, Fred's got cookies for us. So despite all the things we disagree on, Fred brings cookies, so that makes Fred the one. They chose the words that they use very deliberately. It wasn't a mistake that they only use citizen to describe, I believe, in the birthright citizen part, and that's it, if I remember correctly.
And the interesting thing is the birthright citizenship, where we've heard this kind of thing, it was not just that it was in the Constitution, it has been worked out through series of precedents. And it was in particular post-Civil War related to people coming over, the Irish, right? The Italians, the Chinese coming here and having children working here. And so there's a series of cases from like 1856 till, World War I, which it kind of went away after World War I, right? But there was like a 60-year period where they were having all this conversation, and they really kind of came to a consensus, which is amazing, right? It was on both sides of the aisle at the time, which is much different than what we have today. But there's a series of Supreme Court decisions that are 9-0, 9-0, 9-0, 9-0, all granting these rights. Which are what the basis of most immigration case law is based on. We've had a bunch of bad congressional decisions over the past 50 years that have led us to the quagmire that we're in today. And that's all related to the way civil processing is done at the borders, right? That's why, because we want both a tourist destination and we don't want too many people to come, or we do, depending on who's in charge, right? It becomes a quagmire.
So I just have two last comments on this. So I'm gonna, talk to some folks in city government and see if there's if they're going to reconsider their position, let's call it. But I'm not going to push too hard, because if they won't do what's in the petition, if they're not going to have a public forum and discuss police issues, then that's going to happen with or without them. And if it's without them, they'll all be invited, and then it'll be clear to see for everyone those that don't show up. And those are the ones that are coddling bad cops. They don't care. They despise good cops, apparently, because they're willing to sacrifice them for these people that are, the small group of people that are scumbags in the department. They'll coddle, they'll protect, because they need to go out there this year and say how much they support the police, because, some of them are totally bereft of other ideas, and that's their whole campaign. And if the police unions are going to push back on that because they took a position opposite of the police union, well, they're really screwed. So despite all talk about public safety, what is paramount in their view to the good of the city is that they're reelected, despite they're willing to leave you at risk to these people. For example, like a story we all saw a few weeks ago of a Worcester police officer was at a youth soccer game in Northborough and couldn't control himself and attacked, I think it was a ref in the middle of the game. Notice we haven't heard about who that person is. There's only one reason for that. We haven't heard a name. There's only one reason for that. Because they haven't been arraigned. And because there was no charges, he's probably already back on the street. A ticking time bomb ready to lose control on you, should you happen to have an interaction with this person. And this is the people that they want to protect.
But the interesting thing about that, this goes to the argument, and the chief has pushed back on us a little bit on this, is that officers aren't held to the same standard. If you flipped out and got into an altercation in public, you would have already been arraigned.
If I did that in Worcester, they might charge me with terrorism and mayhem.
I kind of want you to get charged with terrorism. I think that would be an interest. I'll go to your hearing, Tom. We'll get people to come on. Freddie, Nathan, and I will bail you out in a second. But this is what we're saying is that everybody should be kind of held to that same basic standard, right? So if we arrest a person on the street for something and an officer does that, they should be arrested as well. Same exact process, right? And if otherwise, what are we saying to regular people? What we're saying is that there's a double standard, and then people view it that way and they think everything is unfair. And so we're asking for it. It's interesting, right? The same people who for 4 years during the Biden administration were telling you not to trust the government are telling you to trust the government now, and not holding them to the lowest standard. Right?
They're saying a lot more than that. They're saying a lot more than that. They're saying, no, right? No, they're saying a lot more than that, though, John. What they're really saying is we're the only ones that you can trust. Everything else is fake news or a deep state conspiracy. That's their position.
And so what I'm coming down to is I'm the only one you guys can all trust, and I should be King John the First, and I'll be a dope king. I would be a dope king, bro.
Listen, anybody that needs to tell you that you can trust them, and like a public, like this, right, with doing news or in public life, whatever, that's the first person you should be skeptical of. My response, how I would put that is, you're welcome to review, I don't know, thousands of articles at this point and find anything I got wrong. And if you do find something, I'll be the first to admit it.
So the best part is that you've gotten some criticism. You went on the Hank Stoll show this week, and did the roundtable, you and Ben, and when you were talking on the roundtable, there was some people not happy with you in the Twitter feeds, and one particular person, Mr. Quist, but he's got you blocked on everything. So what he does is he talks smack. He doesn't realize that I can see him on a bunch of things.
Just to be clear about that situation, Mr. Irrelevant has been invited for a one-on-one on this podcast with me. You can review. I did 2 interviews last year. I think they both were. Maybe one was this year with people that one a police union president at the time, and another one that I have vast political differences with. And it always stayed respectful. It was always about the content. Now, I have no illusions that Mr. Quist would be able to do that. He would obviously attack me the whole time, but I wouldn't attack him because it's about the content. But he's very not politely declined that invitation.
Yes. And as I understand it, he's also been offered to come on Hank Stoll's with you.
Oh, really?
And talk it out.
And you won't do it?
Talk about live, and I don't think that he'll do that as well. So
no, sounds like the West Boylston resident's a little scared.
Oh, wait a second. Wait a second, Tom. Tom, are you saying that he's not a Worcester resident? But he speaks about all things Worcester. What are you saying? Should he change his page to West
Actually, no.
Boylston Politics 101?
Well, actually, though, how can he be on a commission if he was in West Boylston? Somebody told me that recently. But as I'm thinking about it in real time, I probably should have thought this before I opened my stupid mouth. He couldn't have been on the commission. He couldn't have been on the commission with you if he doesn't live in the city.
It might have moved since then. I mean, we resigned more than a year ago, so I mean, it's possible that he moved.
Oh yeah, no.
and,
So
yeah.
I take that back. That could be correct.
Yeah.
Let me issue a real-time correction. I don't know if that's true now that I think of it, because he couldn't have been on that commission. So we'll just stay with Mr. Irrelevant. Moving on. On more police stuff on the agenda for this week, although my petition won't be there, because God forbid we asked them to talk about what's true, is a report to the city council that's already released as a press release. It's called an analysis, but it's really it's really PR. It's just shy of 5,000 words. All the things that the department has found wrong with the report. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they haven't only identified the cases in which there's something wrong with, right? And so the cases, what should we assume about the cases that they don't mention in this 5,000 word PR release? If you're not rebutting them, then is that true? And then if there's things in the report that are true, why aren't I seeing, quote, the handcuffs slapped, quote unquote, on somebody?
Yeah, right. He's gonna lock him up. I mean, so we last week we brought up that the video of the officer on Main Street slapping the man who was spitting, repeatedly while he was in a gurney, right? And so because the chief of police addressed a different gurney incident, and so you go back and look at the DOJ report. The DOJ report doesn't mention that particular gurney. It just says a man slapped on a gurney. So the chief went and found an incident that refers to an officer slapping. So apparently there's multiple officer slapping people on gurneys. It's like a regular. It's just a scourge of things happening all the time, right? And so the interesting thing is he decided to address the one where the officer was justified in his response, and didn't address the one where the police department and the officer was suspended for filing a false report, because they filed a false report, but they were only suspended after the video surfaced and was given to the police department.
I actually don't, if I remember correctly, and you correct me if I'm wrong, if I remember correctly, in that case, the violation they found was actually that he didn't report the use of force.
That is correct. That you were 100. So it wasn't because he slapped him.
No, they can beat the crap out of you. It's fine.
Right. So when we say that, that's what the response is. We did handle that. We handled that internally, and we suspended him because he didn't file the correct report. No. We're not saying that. He assaulted a man on a gurney who was strapped down on the gurney, and another officer says that he was spitting on him at some point. Right? There's no video of the spitting. There's just the officers, the EMTs at the scene. Their report does not reflect the officer's report, which is kind of part of what led to the discrepancy thing, right? In that specific case. What I'm saying is the officer assaulted a man who was defenseless. That's what happened. Clearly, distinctly on video. It's an assault and battery. And so,
yeah, I guess I guess we could give the chief the benefit of the doubt. He picked the wrong case. But
every case they picked were ones where they could find evidence to overturn. They avoided the beer garden case. They avoided the case with the pastor being tased multiple times in his back. They avoided the one where the young man was wearing a white jogging outfit and was a clearly Hispanic young man, and the officer identified him as the black young man who was wearing black pants with red shoes. So they avoided every, and he had the dog assault. That was the one where the dog bit down on the kid's neck, And then that led to one of the settlements, right? That was one of the settlements. The dog wouldn't let go because sometimes the chief kind of addressed the difference between the bark and bite versus the other version, right?
Yeah.
Some cases, in the way that they use the training now, the dog locks on. That happens with dogs. Anybody who's ever had a dog before, sometimes particular pit bulls, obviously they don't use pit bulls for police dogs, but they will lock on because it's like a defense mechanism, and they just hold on. And in this case, the dog locked on, and then the young man sued the police department and won. Sued the city, and the city had to pay into a settlement, right? We're saying that why doesn't the chief address those cases where there's clear and distinct evidence that those cases no, but they're only addressing the cases where they have evidence to clear themselves, which again, that's everybody's personal vested interest. I always want to clear myself too. I'll talk to you all day long about the cases that I was found innocent. Damn Skippy, because I didn't have to go to jail for those, right? Let's talk about those. 100%. When John got off, it's a good thing, right? So that, like, anybody wants to talk about the things where you don't get in trouble. It's the things where you get in trouble that you avoid, and it looks clearly like the chief of police is avoiding talking about those specific cases. And there will be zero people in the 6-member majority that will say one word about that on Tuesday.
How about that the word enforcement hasn't been said in 5 months?
Of the new policies, yeah. Yeah, what's the mechanism for enforcement?
We wrote a bunch of stuff down, cheer for us. Well, you had stuff written down before, and when it was openly violated, nothing happened. So you write all the stuff down you want. Let's talk about the enforcement mechanisms. And they just won't do it. There's just no discussion about it. Why? Because, it's pretty obvious that they have a professional cover-up unit inside the department. That's what it's there for, to cover up bad activity by police officers.
In one of the post-commission reports, there was an officer who deployed his taser to like the face of a person, and it was sustained. And the remedy in that case was to retrain the person in the use of a stun gun. However, so I've thought about this case a lot, like a lot. The officer decided that the best course of action was to take a taser and put it into somebody's face and in the face. Okay, there is no training that ever said that was a good idea. It doesn't exist at all for liability purposes, because when you put electricity into the face, there's a potential for long-term injury, right? That you can get sick from it. You can have all kinds of problems from zapping someone in the head. And I always wondered about that case. The result was retraining, but it wasn't necessary that they be retrained. It was necessary that somebody deal with the illogic of the person thinking it was right to zap him in the face. What led to that? Not because the same process would be to shoot him in the face, right? Whether it depends on what weapon they deployed. But the weapon deployed in this case was the taser. They zapped him. The police department's response is, we're going to retrain this officer on the use of force in relation to the taser deployment. How does that address the issue? It doesn't address the issue. They already clearly are a not thinking well person because they decided to tase somebody in the face. So you have to think about those things and then say, okay, we should address that. Did that officer go through counseling? Right? Because I'm concerned for them. Are they gonna pop out? Are they gonna just punch somebody, hit somebody, hurt somebody in some point? Because that's a response that doesn't seem logical, is to tase someone. Now, if they were tangled up on the ground and wrestling, but in this case, apparently it was 4 feet away, yada, yada, zap the tasers in the face. So, I question the thought process, Tom, is what I'm worried about. I'm worried about the logic behind the policies. The policies sound fine, but the people that are operating the policies, who's reviewing them? It goes back to the old Alan Moore thing. Who watches the Watchmen, right? Who's watching them? Who watches the Watchmen? I don't know. Who's checking?
Nobody. And if they have to look at them, they'll find a way. Yeah. You wonder why this department is in a select group of awful departments nationwide. because they've allowed it to become this way. The city councils tolerate it. City managers have washed it. I mean, the last city manager literally covered up, paid money for an independent report on the chief's behavior and then didn't do anything about it. And it says right in it, both he did these things, I'm paraphrasing, he did, no, I mean, it looks like he did these things, and he lied to us about it. And he went,
and that's the thing when we bring these things up, their logic is, well, he resigned, so it doesn't matter. No, because he was in the leadership position for a decade, and that leadership position means that his thought process infected all the people below him. And so how do we know that thought process is not currently present? Right? We need to think about that. And so I appreciate Chief Sautier's approach to this has been, hey, since I've been in charge, we've started to do the changes. Okay, I'll give you credit for starting to change
and
things.
I believe that, but you haven't fixed it all in a year and a half. That's ridiculous.
No, but so the thing is, Tom. So not to go all Jesus on everybody, but everybody knows the word forgiveness, right? So, but forgiveness is attached to something, and the attached to is repentance or saying I'm sorry. So if you don't say sorry, it's hard to forgive somebody, right? We all know that. It's just I'm not going religious. I'm just saying, in particular, if someone does something to you and they don't say sorry, it's really hard to forgive them for that thing. It's difficult for all of us, right? What we've said and what the chief, he still hasn't addressed it, and the city manager hasn't addressed it, and the mayor hasn't addressed it, and the chair of the public safety commission hasn't addressed it, and nobody really has addressed it, is that harm was done and no one has said sorry, right?
Because they don't care.
And that's the problem, and that's what the challenge is. And of course, the response to you and I and other people who have made these challenges is that they just destroy our reputation, right? They're just gonna be like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna take these two down. We're gonna make them pay. We're gonna do everything we can, and it's like, is that really the right approach, guys? Because
see, here's the thing.
I'm not saying you can't be forgiven. I'm saying that the way that you get to forgiveness is to say you're sorry. Just say you're sorry.
Speaking of the people in the political realm, here's the thing though with that approach is they're really bad at it. They're actually really terrible at this gaslighting and propaganda thing. They do it a ton, but they're bad at it. It's very transparent, And I mean, after 5 months, it's really tough to not just, again, and I've said this many times, I like a lot of the people on council. That's irrespective of political, perspective. But is this really who you are? Because this isn't the person that I talk to, the individuals that I talk to. But they walk in that room and they turn into statues.
So, but all of them say the same thing, and this is where I disconnect, and find myself really wanting to go as hard as possible in discovering information to prove them wrong, is that they all say, well, you got to understand that's not how things are done. See, we need to talk about it, and we need to develop a process. And then when they decide that something's important to them, then that goes out the window, like Candy with the tax on the colleges, right? Candy for some reason is activated on it. It seems very much like a wedge issue that she's trying to use in her election cycle, and that someone gave it to her. It looks very much like the mayor may have kind of passed this on to her. And so now that she's going to run on the 5% tax, but before, and the city manager addressed it, as in, I've been working behind the scenes. I've been doing it the way that we say. Right? He said it on the council floor, we've been having these private conversations. So it's hard to give you can't have it both ways, guys. You can't say on the one hand, we need to do everything behind closed doors and we can't talk about it. But then when you get passionate about it, then it's going to be a big issue. Same with the real estate stuff, right? They have not addressed the Madison Properties thing. They don't want to address the Madison Properties thing. While I'm watching attorneys generals around the nation in Republican and Democratic states now sue these companies for the RealPage software stuff over and over again. There was just another article that Tom and I were reading of New Jersey, the Attorney General for New Jersey, by the way, not a liberal dude at all, going hard in the paint after the real estate companies, one of them happening to be Boston Capital, named again in one of these lawsuits, and so another local firm. And those things are they were one of the finance people or something in one of the projects.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing it.
Yeah. But anyways, the point is that it's often the same big companies that are involved with almost all these projects anyways at the big municipal level. When you see a big city kind of project, they're all involved. And when we bring it up to the city council, they're like, well, we can't, that's not how things are done.
Yeah,
We're going
right,
to talk
yeah.
about it over here. And then they do the same thing with the cable company. They do the same thing with the police department. So then to me, the answer to your question, Tom, is this who they are? Yeah, because in every situation, unless it affects them specifically, they handle it with that's not how things done. We need to talk about it offline. But as soon as it becomes a passion issue for them, then they talk about it in public. A lot of reasons, Fred.
Yeah, a lot of reasons. Because they don't want to be seen talking bad about developers. And
Because
they're
those
not
people
going to
give them
do
a lot of money in the elections, Tom.
And they're not going to do anything to address the issue.
The systemic issue, right underneath it. The issue with housing and all the
everything is somebody is the enemy. Somebody's bad. Madison Properties is bad. Not that there's no protections for the city in any of these contracts. That's not the problem. It's that Madison Properties is bad.
Right. And again, Madison Properties, let me say this to their approach to things. I'm not against them. They're doing things exactly how the system is set up for them to do things.
They have money, they can do whatever they want.
They're operating a business. And so, but the city councilors can't pontificate on one side about the TIF and the this and the that and the houses coming off of the tax rolls and yada yada yada, and not address the systemic issues which is related to the developers that have been given, special.
When you want them to talk about anything that isn't glowingly positive about the police department, and they run the other way.
Exactly. And like they, here's the thing. This is going to surprise some of our viewers that watch. They don't want to talk about the fire department still not having a contract, right? Probably the most vulnerable of our civil servants, the folks that face the most danger. And I get it. Police officers definitely face danger, but firefighters, injuries, sickness and death happens at a much higher level because of the intensity of the situations that they're running into, and they still don't have a contract. And there's bupkis publicly from the city manager and from the mayor. Now I have two approaches to that. One is there's some kind of conspiracy and they're going to release a contract like right before the election and say, look, we got it done for our helpers. But that I thought that the last election, and they don't have a contract since then. So you would think our firefighters are just as important, if not, or they're at the same level as the police. They don't have a contract. I want the firefighters to be paid. I 100% want them to be taken care of. There's even more we can get into with the condition of the firehouses that weren't, paid for by the state because of tragedy, right? So there's a bunch of firehouses in the city that are just in horrible shape and not for dwelling, for as long as they have. And so those firefighters are suffering. Aren't those the people we care about, right? Don't we want to do that? Oh, we can't talk about it. We have to do things offline, yada, yada, yada. Till it becomes a passion issue for them, and then they'll want to talk about it in public. But you heard it here first on the This Week in Worcester podcast. They haven't talked about it for 3 years. So, why are they avoiding it? Because they don't want to give up the money, because then the pots of money that they have to move around, that's the problem, right? Again, it's silly. There's a lot of inefficiency, and it leads to these policy thinking processes that are just kind of whack.
Last thing on the report on the rebuttal, I guess, to the DOJ report. A couple of instances, at least, the chief says, so he'll lay out whatever the DOJ says, then he starts his response with, according to the office's incident report, and you're just like, wait a minute, stop right there. Who is it? Because if we don't know who it is, you can't make any determinations of his credibility, because they've harbored so many people who have shown a willingness to lie. And lying on an incident report is also a crime in Massachusetts, but it's only a misdemeanor, so they can do that and keep their job. And of course, they never charge them or forward charges to the DA, and the DA wouldn't charge them any. So I mean, one of the worst things a government can do is lock you up for a thing you didn't do. And our city And our city government's wholly unconcerned on if that happens or not. Wholly unconcerned. Zero interest.
So and I mean, that's not just our city. I would say that that's an American problem. We seem to be okay with locking up innocent people. There's two schools of thought on law. Like, to me, no innocent person should ever go to jail. I'd rather have a guilty person go free than an innocent person spend a second in prison, right? That's my opinion. But other people think they'd rather get all the guilty people and a couple innocent people just to make sure they got all the guilty people. The problem with that theory is that it's never worked in human history, right? People get away with things all the time. And so you have zero evidence that you've been able to do that and manage that. And so the fact that you're locking up someone who didn't do something wrong, going even further, as in writing a report. So, let me tell you a quick story, Tom. There's an officer who I talked to probably twice a week, right? A longtime friend. We've known each other for a long time. He talks to me on a cell phone that is not his cell phone because he doesn't want to be known for talking to me. That's a fact. Okay. It's a real story, whatever. I think people would be able to figure out real quick if they just looked up where I went to high school and where I played basketball.
Why don't
it wouldn't
you shut
take
up?
long. Huh?
Why don't you shut up about
No, I'm not gonna
details
shut
about
up.
it?
He knows exactly. He's watching right now, and he's probably with his wife right now, being, "Oh, John's gonna tell on me." He tells me this all the time, that some of the people that were charged with things poorly were bad guys, and so at least we got them. And we've argued about that for 30 years. Some of those guys are bad guys. It doesn't matter. The thing that you locked them up for wasn't true. So it doesn't matter if they're a bad guy or not. That's immaterial to the way our system is supposedly structured. Justice is blind, right, Tom? Justice is supposed to be blind, right? That's the problem. Our system is predicated on hypocrisy. It's not real. And so then it only works when it works for the people who happen to be in charge, and it changes depending on the day. Hey, listen, I was all for Sheriff Andrea Cabral in Suffolk County when she came along and said, all right, we're not going to hold people in for misdemeanor crimes in the Suffolk County Sheriff. We're going to self bail them out and give them out on free bail and personal recognizance. We're going to make that determination at the jail. I was all for that. But then when some of the people who were giving her money were committing blatant crimes, she also wasn't involved in investigating them. So no. You don't get to release the person who stole a pair of shoes and say, look at what I did. But on the other end, walk away from the person who's stealing, because we got the bad guys, right, Tom? No. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't. You have to be consistent. You have to hold them to a higher standard. It's just a basic concept, and I don't understand why it's such a fight. Such a fight.
Last point on this is just a kind of overall point is remember the EMSI report on the fire department they did a few years ago? They got a company that specializes in emergency response type departments, and they did this months-long study. It was hundreds. I forget how the price tag on it, but it was a few $100,000 if I remember correctly. I mean, it was a real report, and there was interesting stuff in it. There was polling of fire department personnel, and excerpts from interviews, and it was an interesting read. I guess maybe you have to be nerdy like me, but it was an interesting read. And then otherwise, like, the city has a master plan or some sort of plan, or we're having a public information session or a public listening session on a million things, everything. But we're piecemealing this. We're writing some policy. Oh, we're listening to we're watching some more body camera footage and, some additional trainings. But none of this is in response to the report. We just decided that we were going to, they're not even pretending they're trying. And it's like, they think that even if they pretend that they're trying, that's an admission of fault. And God forbid you take some responsibility.
What is that word again? Say that word again.
It's like people that, are generally pretty well, pretty able to organize things pretty well as far as developing plans and, including public or whatever. And they just, like, as soon as it comes to the police department, their owners told them that they can't, and they just turn into toddlers instantly.
Their owners told them. Oh man.
I mean, somebody clue me in on what's happening then. Because, well, actually, nothing's happening. They're not doing anything. They're not doing anything. They're not doing anything. Why? Because they're afraid.
Fred, you need to bring him nice cookies, Fred. Otherwise, he's not going to calm down. He needs more
I'm probably
cookies.
not going to calm down even with cookies because I'm tired of this stage show. They're working harder to pretend like nothing's wrong than they would have to work to actually fix the problems.
Well, so then how are we going to fix it, Tom?
I'm hanging on the cusp of the edge. I'm on the cliff. I'm looking over, and
are you leading a revolution? Is that what's happening?
No. But I mean, like they think they come for me, with the dispatching Quist, who's close to several people in government, and all these other people that are starting to now bark at us. I don't care. They apparently don't understand what it's like to come for people. Because I've about had enough. Like this is now 5 months of bullshit. I've had enough.
Right. So Tom, they definitely when they came after me, they thought, oh, this will shut him up. Like if someone posts him on Facebook, that'll take him down, right? Because my life revolves around Facebook, right? Like, no, I don't care what people say on that thing. Now, do I engage on it? I do engage, because sometimes that's the only way to talk to somebody. But as far as do you have any idea the amount of people in the world that have probably blocked us and are just talking smack on us in a completely different version of Facebook that we don't realize? Like, no, it doesn't matter, dude. It doesn't matter. It means nothing. And so, they believe that it means something to somebody. And we see even candidates, Tom, that are going on there thinking that that's the path towards victory. And, it goes back to that state Senate campaign when Robin Kennedy, all the girls said you look cute in the pic, John. When Robin Kennedy ran for state senate against Mayor Petty, I remember that day. I think I've told you the story like one-on-one, but I remember that day at the backpack drive at the Village, and Mayor Petty didn't come to that event because he was doing something with Joyner Lucas. And it ended up being kind of like a political backfire because he had promised to go to the one at the Village. And so then a lot of the folks in District 4 just didn't vote for Mayor Petty. And I've said this story. I've told this to Senator Kennedy, too, how that day made me kind of rethink how I thought about her. Was that at the end of the backpack drive, she turned up King Street. Now, for all of those of you who live in Worcester, we know how King Street has been viewed our entire lives. Okay. And so this, I don't know how to describe Robin in any other way, but this, regular white lady, right? Other than that, right? She didn't go to Main Street. She turned up King Street and started walking and started knocking on the apartment building doors. Now, that really won me over in that she didn't think she was going to win on Instagram or on Facebook. She thought the way to do it was to go to a neighborhood, by the way, a neighborhood that never votes, it traditionally never voted. In fact, you would have to, if you want to say who brought the votes that do vote, it's probably Shah Asia and Parley from their position in the Village as it changed from Stone Soup. The few folks that do vote in that neighborhood vote because of their integration into that neighborhood and their care and their concern for those local people. And so if you go back to the vote totals, and I still happen to have those, but Robin Kennedy won District 4, and it was a primary. It was the rainiest, coldest, primary of all time. But she won District 4. It was like 70 votes to like 4. And that's because all the people who did decide to come out came out because of that thought that she said, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to do that kind of footpad work. People, I'll be honest with you. I've been watching a lot of the candidates. I see them out there, I was sitting in a restaurant the other day and Caden Davis came by, was walking up and down the street and had their papers available for people to sign. I saw I saw Louis Ojeda out doing door knocking in District 4. I seen Attell and Jose both out in District 5. I see them walking around all right now doing door knocking and doing neighborhood outreach. And that's another tough race. That's how those things are done. So somebody saying something on Facebook, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. So Tuesday should be another interesting meeting. I hope some people will show up, but I think people have given up. I mean, look, how do you get to celebrating, all just coming just shy of 20% turnout in the last municipal election? And we celebrated that. That was high compared to recent years. Well,
Yeah, that was high.
Yeah, no, I mean, some people, look, half people aren't going to vote anyway, right? They're eligible. That's pretty standard. But what about the other 30%? It's less than half. They've given up. They don't think it's ever going to change. I don't blame them.
And by the way, in historically, it's not that long ago where there were more than half of the electric turnouts. It wasn't that long ago. We're talking about the early 90s is the last time. So that seems like a long time ago, but it's not that long ago. So what changed in around that time that and it's a precipitous drop off, Tom.
Yep.
A massive change out of nowhere where we were getting 50s and 60s and 70s for years, and then it dropped into the 20s and into the teens in a couple of years where there was just absolutely no participation. Could it be that the same cycle of promises of renaissance of Worcester, and we're going to reinvigorate this, we're going to reinvigorate that, and it's the same old backroom deals behind closed doors. Things are only passionate when they affect me personally. That kind of politics, people are just disillusioned, man. And so that's really what's driving that. And how do you get kids to come out when there's nothing for them? Nothing for them. No issues are related to their issues. None, because they think about things completely differently than we do. And of course they do. They're a completely different generation, grew up in a different time in a different way. And their generation has been like a series of crises their whole lives. It's been crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis. So how are they going to believe the next group of leaders that say, if you don't vote for me, it's a disaster, right? Well, every kid's going to be like, well, what's the difference between what's going on now and what it doesn't make a difference to them, which is why they don't vote, So how do we get them involved? I don't know. I don't know who the right person is, the right movement to get it done.
Well, I would imagine, the kids you're talking, the generation you're talking about is a little young for this, but, we were told that they hated us for our freedoms and we were going to fight for freedom and democracy in the world. And then my friends get sent to Iraq and came home with shrapnel in their head or didn't come back at all. I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it. That's a generation before the kids that are 18 now, I think. Yeah. But that's part of it.
And then, of course, the fathers of those children remember Vietnam, and so then it's just the same cycle that they've felt. It's like, oh well, you did this to my kids. You did to my kids what you did to me, and then their fathers remember the wars before that, and so it's just a series of things, and it really has never stopped in 100 years, and realistically, historically speaking, the cycles are the same for years and centuries and centuries and centuries. So the only thing we can do, Tom, is focus on what we can do here locally, which is what you and I are about, right? We're trying to focus on the issues that matter to the people in Worcester. And do I want to save Davidson, Indiana? Sure. But I really need to focus on Worcester. And by the way, yes, someone asked me the other day, all the random towns I've been mentioning, do they have a common theme? And yes, they do have a common theme, but I'm not going to tell you what they are.
Get your research on, folks.
Yeah, that's right. Go back, watch our show, and you'll start to figure it out.
But and just a reminder, it's apparently the city manager's administration says that city councils can't talk to its voters.
I wonder what the city council in Raleigh, North Carolina is like. How do you feel about that?
You want to talk about some stuff that's happening in the very near term in Elm Park.
Oh yeah, so on this week's council agenda, item 11H is City Councilor Pasillo's item, and I will just read it real quickly. And it basically says, request city manager, request assistant commissioner of public works and parks, provide city council with a report detailing the planned renovations around the playground in Elm Park. Said report should include information relative to the anticipated timeline for said renovations, why said renovations could not have been completed at an earlier date to allow for resident use during the summer months, and plans for notifications around future playground renovations. I'm very grateful to Councilor Pasillo for putting this item on. I think it's an important one. So my office is literally right outside of Elm Park. My office is on Elm Street, and so when I step out of my office and I take a right, I can walk directly into the park. So I walk there all the time. It's a beautiful park. It is truly a miracle in the middle of our city, and many of our parks are, and we're lucky that we have. However, about a week and a half ago, there was a sign posted on the playground sign that says the playground is going to be being closed sometime next week, and it's going to be closed for an indeterminate period of time, up to 11 weeks, extending, through most of the early summer. And of course, there's a ton of families around here, and so everybody, and that playground is used every single day. Every day there are kids in there, and so a lot of families are upset, so they reach out to their counselor. And I don't want to blame the commissioner of public works. This goes back to the communications of the city being abjectly and objectly poor. There is no way to say that they get these things out. If you go to look at the way the city approaches things, they do a lot of things in press releases to traditional media like the Telegram and Gazette. They go on Spectrum, those kind of things, and you don't really see them engaging at a real kind of organic manner with the regular people. Some of the counselors do, and we've seen that because those counselors have a voting block that they've been able to curate over the years, right? In this case, there's nobody from the city manager's office, not the public works department, because their job is to, and I walk there every day. They're cleaning the trees, they're mowing the lawn, they're putting the stuff in the trash. It's not their job to explain why they were told to hang that sign. That's not their job. So the people that are yelling at the guy in the yellow shirt, the guy in the yellow shirt has no idea. He has no idea. He was just, someone told him, tape the sign to the thing, and he put up the sign, and that's the sign. But the city has a public communications problem, and it just does not get out information to the people of the city of Worcester. And I think that is directly related, Tom, to the despair in the voting process. People just don't feel communicated well. And in this case, it is a super busy park that they should have found a way to fix it, in a different time. Now, the length of time, I have no idea, because I don't know about the contractors. I have no idea who's being hired. I don't know who got the contract. It could take 2 days. It could take 11 weeks. I don't know. I don't know enough about playground changes to tell you this. I do know that the bridge also needs to be fixed, the smaller, older bridge. It's been broken for a while, and so that that's kind of a safety hazard. So it makes sense that they're going to try to do all those renovations at the same time. But the communication was super poor. And so I hope that this item leads to a better engagement by the city manager's office on how to engage with people, because they're just not getting the information out. And to be honest with you, maybe they should use your service more. You have a terrific readership. By the way, absolutely dominating the person we mentioned earlier in the show, just who said that they think they're beating us, which is hilarious. And engaged in more ways than just the press release to the TNG, because that is the bread and butter of this city administration, is to release information to the Telegram and Gazette. That is their number one approach to communications, and I think that has to change, Tom. At some point, it's got to change.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that typically Facebook finishes as my third or fourth highest source of traffic to the site every month. Do with that what you will.
Yeah. So, I don't want to, I don't know if I sent it to you, but I sent it to somebody the other day, a picture of my personal statistics. So Facebook pays me. it pays me every month, and it pays Manny. And Manny gets paid pretty good, like decent. It's not a small amount, it's a chunk every month. And so, you know, that's just someone taking a shot, not knowing what they're taking a shot with. So
yeah. Worcester's chief advocate for bad cops beat me on Facebook. I'm embarrassed, let me tell you. And that I almost forgot. I heard a guy I know might have a Mass Independent Film Festival award.
Yeah, so the Dirty Jaren Poetry Show documentary, if I can get it nice into the camera there, we won Outstanding Achievement in Feature Documentary from the MIF, which was really cool. I didn't expect this. This was kind of a surprise. I mean, we got nominated a couple weeks ago, but some of the people that we were going up against, I was like, there's no way. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, they were really good. And so the fact that they honored us, they take the approach that they don't do best awards, they just do outstanding achievement. And it was nice to see the film recognized for Manny's sake and really for Leanne's sake, because Leanne put a ton of work into editing that film, and for the poets at the Dirty Jaren. So I don't know what people are doing tomorrow night. Monday night is a night that people don't like to do a lot of things, but if you want to swing by the Jaren and go, I might pop by with the award and congratulate them for the work that they've done sustaining that community. It's a cool thing that they do down there. They read poems every Monday night at Ralph's Rock Diner in Worcester, and it was nice. It was nice. It was something cool, and it's a Worcester thing. It was a movie completely funded in Worcester, made in Worcester, edited in Worcester. So support local films, support independent filmmakers, and which we're, my other thing, Hollywood, which is over here, there. We're trying to do things in a cool way, making filmmaking sustainable in this area and doing it in a way ethically speaking and caring for people. And it was just nice that this movie, people put a lot of hard work into it. It got a little recognition. So I'm very pleased. I was surprised, but I'm not surprised because I know how hard people work. So it was cool. Very cool.
Congratulations to you, the folks that worked with you on this. I, of course, was at the premiere. It was good times.
It was good times. That was a good day, the premiere.
So once again, if you can, show up on Tuesday to City Hall, and I don't know, maybe ask your counselors to, after 5 months, maybe start talking about the things that are true in the report and what's being done to fix them. And when they tell you, well, we wrote some stuff down, be like, that's nice. That's not actually fixing the problem. That's writing stuff down.
Real solutions.
But right now, the solution for right now is moving on to John's favorite part of the show.
No. So again, Tom, I have to challenge you week after week, because that is just a false accusation. The fact is that people around the world now, this internationally speaking, and I know this because there's one person who does not live in our country who watches our show. Internationally speaking, Tom, the worldwide consensus is that their favorite part is when I ask you about your favorite things. That is consensus worldwide, and you just continue to hold the line with a false premise that is not true. So this is Tom's favorite things. It's the best part of the show, is where I ask Tom's favorite things. And since we just talked about a playground, I'm going to ask you, Tom, when there was back in the day, when there was a young Tom, and young Tom went to the park and the playground, what was your favorite playground contraption to get on and just live out the life of Tom Marino in the playground?
That was so long ago that I think I might have died and came back. I think I'm going to ask you my favorite playground, and I was going to say Rocket Land in Auburn, because I grew up outside the city. What's the thing that goes round and round, and you can get on it and whip yourself into other kids, and kids got this is back in the day, so kids got hurt, bled.
Merry-go-round. The merry-go-round.
No, that's I guess it's sort of like that, but it's you know, it wasn't like a merry-go-round though. It had like the metal poles. You could like sit on it and hang on and whip around and like stick your leg out and catch some kid in the stomach. And it was wholly dangerous. This is, you know, again, I'm old, so it was wholly dangerous and did not belong anywhere near children. But I don't remember, you know, something merry-go-round-ish. I don't know. Weird question. I'm old.
So, you know, I would say that my favorite was always the seesaw. Love the seesaw. Big seesaw guy. But it was always hard because I've been bigger than everybody my whole life. I had to find someone who could balance me out on the seesaw. Like I could never get, you know, because I've been the same height since I was 13 years old. And so I've been the same. I was this height, this weight since I've been 13. I've never changed really, except for a little bit up and a little bit down. And so I love the seesaw. Today they got these like jungle gym things where they're like, you know, they're more like American Ninja Warrior stuff that they have for the kids, and those are cool. Of course, you know, I'm too big to go on those things, so I can't go over there and hang out and play with the kids. Plus, that would probably be strange if you saw me all of a sudden run over there like a big dork and jump on the items that are being, you know, young kids are hanging on. So I always like that. And then I also grew up super poor, so we used to like play in the middle of the street, doing stuff in the middle of the street, and I loved me some street hockey back in the day. Street
I
hockey
did so much street hockey.
is like the best in the universe, guaranteed to split someone's skin, but the most fun sport, epic games of street hockey that would we're going to the playground, Maria.
I mean, so I have a question though. I mean, although, you know, because you were bigger than most kids at the time, you know, the seesaw was problematic, but I mean, that also gave you an advantage that you could walk over to two kids on the seesaw and jump on one side and fire one kid into the street.
So not that, but I was always a wrestling fan growing up, right? And so this actually happened. So when I was in Boston, this is in the Mission Hill project. If anybody knows the Mission Hill project, we took one of the picnic tables. They had these like old wooden picnic tables. We put two of them together. We put a blue tarp over the two of them and made a wrestling mat. And so I loved Jake the Snake. And if anybody remembers Jake the Snake, he used to jump off the top rope with the, you know, and do his thing. And so I climbed up onto the eave, right? Which, so they were 3-floor things, and so I climbed up on the eave and I jumped off on and dropped a flying elbow on my buddy and absolutely sent him to the hospital and completely annihilated him because we had no clue how to do it, you know. So we just copied what we saw on the Saturday morning wrestling, and yeah, almost completely wrecked him and ended him. Broke his sternum, broke like 3 or 4 of his ribs, and so got in a bunch of trouble. It's good that we have playgrounds where kids can go do controlled stuff versus, you know, maniac stuff that I used to do when I was a kid.
One of the only times I, you know, like wrestled the sport, like the, you know, the collegiate level, I don't know how you differentiate it from the performance wrestling, but you know what I mean, the actual sport of wrestling.
Yep.
One of the few times, my opponent basically pile drivered me. And I mean, I was young. I couldn't have been maybe a teen, but I was like very early teens if I was a teen. And I came up swinging, and that did not go over well.
Because that's a pile driver in real life is a harmful act. It is not.
Yes.
It is not as easy as they make it look at the sports entertainment side of wrestling. So
right.
Yeah.
I was not awarded the victory for landing most punches. That was I didn't realize was not a category that they scored.
Yeah, you definitely, pile drivers are also illegal, so he probably didn't get a point for pile driving you. That is also against the rules. So, you know.
Yeah. After I lost my mind, nobody's really interested in what the outcome was.
That's a great story. That's a great story.
I mean, I was crying and swinging.
Now we got to get pictures of you in the wrestling outfit. You know, with the
no, it wasn't all that. Wasn't all that.
No, none of that.
I didn't have like the headgear and none of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are cool days.
Do you, sir, I figured I realized it was mostly me yelling, but I figured we wouldn't do 2.5 hours today. Do you, sir, have anything else?
No, that's it. That's all I got for tonight.
Maria, no, I saw that, and no, I'm ignoring you. Why are you bringing up old-ish?
The comments section in This Week in Worcester might be the best one in the city.
Well, yeah, and then these people, and God love her, but I've known her 100,000 years, so she knows things. You know what I mean? I've known her 100,000 years. So that's it for us today. I hope I yelled less. It was hard to yell more than last week. City Council on Tuesday, if you can make it. Step to the mic, express whatever you'd like. But if you're looking for ideas, how about let's talk about what's true in the report. It's only been 5 months. And otherwise, you love me now, Maria. You don't need to love me past tense. You love me now.
You tell her, Tom.
Yeah, she like it's a used to be thing. Come on, girl. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Thank you for your participation in the chat. Thanks for listening to us carry on. We will, of course, try to screw it up less next week. Until then, This Week it was out.